Snowflakes and Love First Edition, published by I2 iHype. 2024, copyright 2024, by Wynn Valentine, all rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form, or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or localities is entirely coincidental. Wynn Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. First edition. Chapter 1. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow across the ballroom of the Grand Metropolis Hotel. Holly Grant stood at the entrance, clipboard in hand, surveying the scene with a practiced eye. Waiters in crisp white uniforms weaved through the crowd, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres to the city's elite. The soft strains of a string quartet filled the air, providing the perfect backdrop for the evening's charity gala. "Everything looks perfect, Holly," said Melissa, her assistant, appearing at her side. "The silent auction is already generating a lot of buzz." Holly nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Good. Let's hope we hit our fundraising goal tonight." As Melissa hurried off to handle a minor crisis with the catering, Holly allowed herself a moment to breathe. This was what she'd worked so hard for, organizing high-profile events in the big city, rubbing elbows with the rich and famous. It was a far cry from the small-town girl she'd once been. So why did she feel so empty? Her gaze drifted to the elaborate ice sculpture centerpiece, a delicate rendering of the city skyline. It was beautiful, but cold, lifeless. Nothing like the warm, twinkling lights of the Christmas festival back home in Thistledown. Home. The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it a flood of memories. The scent of pine and cinnamon, the sound of carols drifting through the town square, the feeling of snowflakes melting on her tongue as she laughed with her family and friends. Holly shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. She had a job to do. As the evening wore on, Holly moved through the crowd with practiced ease, ensuring everything ran smoothly. She fixed a donor's name card, gently guided an intoxicated guest towards the water station, and smoothed over a disagreement between two committee members with diplomatic skill. It wasn't until the last guest had departed and the cleanup crew had arrived that Holly finally allowed herself to relax. She slipped out onto the hotel's balcony, the cool night air a welcome respite after the stuffy ballroom. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. Holly fished it out, smiling when she saw the name on the screen. "Grace, it's so good to hear from you," she answered, her voice warm with affection for her oldest friend. "Holly, I'm not catching you at a bad time, am I?" Grace's familiar voice came through the speaker, bringing with it a wave of homesickness Holly hadn't been prepared for. "No, not at all. The gala just wrapped up. How are things in Thistledown?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, that's actually why I'm calling. We need your help, Hole." Holly's brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" "It's the Christmas festival. The committee's in over their heads, and with the new town manager pushing for all these modern changes, we could really use your expertise." The Christmas festival. Holly's heart gave a little leap at the thought. How many years had it been since she'd attended? Since she'd helped her mother string lights across the town square, or judged the gingerbread house competition? "I don't know, Grace," Holly hedged, even as a part of her yearned to say yes. "I've got a lot of commitments here in the city." "Just think about it, okay?" Grace pleaded. "It would mean so much to everyone, and I miss you, Hole. We all do." After they hung up, Holly stood at the balcony railing, looking out over the glittering city skyline. It was beautiful in its way, but it wasn't home. She thought about the gala she'd just orchestrated, flawless, elegant, and utterly forgettable. Then she thought about the Thistledown Christmas Festival, messy, chaotic, and filled with more warmth and joy than any event she'd planned in years. Before she could second-guess herself, Holly pulled out her phone again and dialed her boss's number. "Sandra? It's Holly. I need to take some personal time. Yes, starting tomorrow. Family emergency." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm going home." As she ended the call, Holly felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt a spark of excitement, of possibility. She was going home, to Thistledown, to the Christmas festival, and maybe, just maybe, to rediscover the part of herself she'd left behind all those years ago. Chapter 2. Finnley MacLeod, known to most as Finn, sat at his desk in Thistledown's town hall, frowning at the budget spreadsheet on his computer screen. The early morning sunlight filtered through the frost-covered windows, casting a soft glow on the piles of papers and folders scattered across his workspace. He rubbed his tired eyes, glancing at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Another early start, but that's what it took to modernize a small town stuck in its ways. Finn had been Thistledown's town manager for just over a year now, and while he'd made progress, there was still so much to do. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his screen. Benjamin Wallace, his colleague and one of the few people in town Finn considered a friend, poked his head in. "Morning, Finn. Brought you some coffee." He set a steaming mug on the desk, the aroma of strong black coffee filling the room. "Thanks, Ben," Finn said, finally tearing his eyes away from the budget. "What's on the agenda for today?" Benjamin hesitated, and Finn's eyes narrowed. He knew that look. "Out with it, Ben. What's wrong?" "Well," Benjamin started, settling into the chair across from Finn's desk. "The Christmas Festival Committee had their first meeting last night." Finn groaned inwardly. The Christmas Festival, a quaint, outdated tradition that seemed to consume the entire town for weeks on end. And they're struggling, Finn. They're short on volunteers, short on ideas, and frankly, short on leadership. "Not our problem," Finn said curtly, turning back to his computer. "We've got real issues to deal with. The water treatment plant needs upgrading, and don't even get me started on the town's outdated emergency response system." Benjamin leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I know, Finn, but this festival, it means a lot to the people here. It brings in tourism, boosts local businesses. We can't just ignore it." Finn sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He knew Benjamin was right, but the thought of diverting resources to string up lights and organize gingerbread house contests made his head throb. "Fine," he conceded. "What do they need?" "Well, that's the thing," Benjamin said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I heard they might be bringing in a professional event planner, someone who used to live here. Holly Grant, I think her name was." Finn's eyebrows rose. A professional? Well, that's something at least. He'd never met Holly Grant, but if she was a local, she'd at least understand the town's quirks. "When does she arrive?" "Should be today or tomorrow," Benjamin replied. "Want me to set up a meeting?" Finn nodded, already turning back to his work. "Yes, as soon as she's settled. And Ben," he called as his friends stood to leave, "make sure she understands that while we appreciate her expertise, we're looking to modernize, not dwell in the past. This festival needs to move Thistledown forward, not hold us back." After Benjamin left, Finn stood and walked to the window, looking out over the sleepy town square. Thistledown was picturesque, he had to admit. The kind of place you'd see on a Christmas card. But it was also falling behind the times, struggling to attract new residents and businesses. He thought back to his last job in the city, to the day he'd been let go. The shame and inadequacy he'd felt as he packed up his desk, the whispers of his colleagues. Never again, he'd promised himself. He'd prove to everyone, to himself, that he was capable, that he could lead and innovate. Thistledown was his chance to do that, to take a charming but outdated town and bring it into the 21st century. He couldn't let sentimental attachments to old traditions stand in his way. As he watched an elderly couple slowly make their way across the square, arm in arm, Finn felt a familiar pang of loneliness. He pushed it aside. He had a job to do, a point to prove. There was no room for distractions. Returning to his desk, Finn pulled up the town's strategic plan. By the time this Holly Grant arrived, he'd have a clear vision for how this festival could serve Thistledown's future, not just rehash its past. After all, that's what a good leader did. And Finnley MacLeod was determined to be the best leader Thistledown had ever seen. Chapter 3. Holly stepped out of her rental car, pulling her coat tighter against the chilly December air. Thistledown's town hall stood before her, its red brick facade adorned with a wreath and twinkling lights. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the meeting ahead. As she climbed the steps, memories flooded back. Of winning the 4th grade spelling bee here, of her first summer job filing papers for the clerk. But now, she was here as a professional, ready to breathe new life into the town's beloved Christmas festival. The warmth of the building enveloped her as she entered, the scent of pine and cinnamon tickling her nose. Holly approached the receptionist, a friendly-looking woman with graying hair. "Good morning," Holly said with a smile. "I'm Holly Grant. I have a meeting with Mr. MacLeod?" The woman's eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, Holly. Welcome back, dear. Mr. MacLeod is expecting you. 3rd door on the right." Holly nodded her thanks and made her way down the hallway, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She paused at the door marked Town Manager, took another steadying breath, and knocked. "Come in," a deep voice called from inside. Holly entered to find a man about her age seated behind a large desk. Finnley MacLeod stood as she approached, his piercing blue eyes appraising her coolly. "Miss Grant," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Thistledown." "Thank you, Mr. MacLeod," Holly replied, shaking his hand firmly, "though it's more of a homecoming for me." "Of course," Finn nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I understand you grew up here." "I did," Holly confirmed, settling into the chair. "It's good to be back, especially for the Christmas festival. I have so many ideas to make this year's event truly special." Finn's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, about that. While we appreciate your expertise, Miss Grant, I think it's important we discuss the direction of this year's festival." Holly's brow furrowed. "The direction?" "Thistledown is at a crossroads," Finn explained, leaning forward. "We need to modernize, to attract new residents and businesses. This festival is an opportunity to showcase our town's potential, not just rehash old traditions." Holly felt a flare of defensiveness. "With all due respect, Mr. MacLeod, those traditions are what make Thistledown special. They're what bring people back year after year." "And yet our population continues to decline," Finn countered. "We need innovation, Miss Grant, new ideas, a fresh approach." "I understand the need for growth," Holly said, trying to keep her voice level. "But completely abandoning our heritage isn't the answer. The Christmas festival is about community, about bringing people together." Finn's jaw tightened. "And how does a gingerbread house contest bring in new industry?" "It's not just about industry," Holly insisted, her frustration mounting. "It's about creating a place where people want to live, to raise their families. That sense of community is what makes Thistledown unique." They stared at each other for a long moment, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, Finn sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, Miss Grant," he said, his tone slightly softer. "I'm not saying we should cancel every tradition, but we need to find a balance, something that honors the past while looking to the future." Holly nodded slowly. "I agree that balance is important. But I think you're underestimating the power of these traditions, Mr. MacLeod. They're not just relics of the past. They're the heart of this town." Finn stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Well, it seems we have our work cut out for us. I look forward to seeing your proposals for the festival. Just remember, we're aiming for progress, not nostalgia." As Holly left the office, her mind was racing. She had expected challenges in organizing the festival, but she hadn't anticipated this. Finnley MacLeod might be handsome, but his cold efficiency threatened everything she loved about her hometown. Walking back to her car, Holly's determination solidified. She would show Finn the true magic of Thistledown's Christmas festival. And maybe, just maybe, she'd melt that icy exterior of his in the process. Back in his office, Finn was having similar thoughts. Holly Grant was not at all what he had expected. Her passion was admirable, even if misguided. This festival planning was going to be more challenging and perhaps more interesting than he had anticipated. Chapter 4. The crisp winter air nipped at Holly's cheeks as she and Finn made their way across the town square. Snow crunched beneath their feet, and holiday decorations adorned the storefronts lining the square. Despite their tense meeting earlier, Holly felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of transforming this space into a winter wonderland. "So, Miss Grant," Finn began, his breath visible in the cold air, "what exactly did you have in mind for the festival?" A brilliant smile spread across Holly's face, reaching her eyes. "Picture this," she said, gesturing broadly. "A grand Christmas tree right in the center, surrounded by twinkling lights and festive decorations. We could have local artisans set up booths here." She pointed to one side of the square, selling handmade crafts and treats. "And over there," she motioned to the other side, "an ice skating rink for families to enjoy." Finn listened, his expression unreadable. "And how does this differ from previous years?" Holly smiled. "We'll enhance everything with a cohesive theme, a homecoming Christmas. It'll celebrate both our town's history and the warmth of coming home for the holidays. We can incorporate stories from longtime residents, displayed on banners around the square." "Interesting," Finn murmured, though his tone suggested he was less than impressed. "And what about attracting outsiders? How does this bring new people to Thistledown?" Holly's enthusiasm didn't waver. "We'll launch a social media campaign, showcasing the unique charm of our town. We can partner with travel bloggers, invite them to experience our festival firsthand. Their posts could reach thousands of potential visitors." Finn raised an eyebrow, a hint of approval in his eyes. "That's not a bad idea, but we need more than just visitors. We need to show that Thistledown is ready for the future." "What if we set up a Future of Thistledown exhibit?" Holly suggested, thinking on her feet. "We could showcase plans for town improvements, potential business opportunities. It would show visitors that we're not just about tradition. We're looking forward to." Finn stopped walking, turning to face Holly. For the first time, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Now that's more like it, Miss Grant. I think we might be able to work with that." Holly felt a flutter in her chest at his approval, which she quickly dismissed. "I'm glad you agree, Mr. MacLeod. And please, call me Holly." "Finn," he replied, offering his hand. As they shook, Holly couldn't help but notice how warm his hand felt despite the cold. Their moment was interrupted by a loud crash. They turned to see an elderly man struggling with a large box of ornaments, several of which had spilled onto the sidewalk. Without hesitation, Holly rushed over to help. "Mr. Johnson, let me give you a hand with those." As she knelt to gather the fallen decorations, she was surprised to see Finn beside her, carefully picking up delicate glass ornaments. "Thank you both," Mr. Johnson said, his weathered face crinkling into a smile. "It's good to see you back, Holly. And you too, Mr. MacLeod. It's not often we see you out and about." Finn looked slightly uncomfortable at the observation, but managed a polite nod. As they helped Mr. Johnson carry his box to the community center, Holly couldn't help but steal glances at Finn. There was something endearing about seeing the usually stoic town manager carefully cradling fragile Christmas ornaments. Once they'd bid farewell to Mr. Johnson, Holly turned to Finn. "Well, that was unexpected. Thank you for helping." Finn shrugged, his professional demeanor back in place. "It was the right thing to do. Now, about the festival plans." As they continued their walk around the square, discussing logistics and potential challenges, Holly found herself warming to Finn despite their differences. There was clearly more to him than the cold efficiency he displayed in his office. By the time they parted ways, Holly felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Organizing this festival would be a challenge, especially with Finn's modernization agenda. But as she watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, she couldn't help but feel that this Christmas in Thistledown was going to be unlike any other. As he headed back to his office, he found himself looking forward to their next meeting, curious to see what other surprises Holly Grant had in store. Chapter 5. Holly pushed open the door to her childhood home, the familiar creak of the hinges bringing a rush of memories. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla wafted through the air, and she could hear the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. "I'm home," she called out, setting down her bags in the entryway. Before she could take another step, a whirlwind of energy came barreling down the hallway. "Holly!" her younger sister Lily exclaimed, throwing her arms around Holly's waist. At 12 years old, Lily was all gangly limbs and boundless enthusiasm. "Hey, Squirt!" Holly laughed, hugging her sister tightly. "I've missed you." Their parents appeared in the doorway, warm smiles on their faces. "Welcome home, sweetheart," her mom said, enveloping Holly in a hug that smelled of home and safety. As they settled in the living room, hot cocoa in hand, Holly felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the steaming mug. This was what she'd been missing in the city, the comfort of family, the sense of belonging. "So, how'd the meeting with the new town manager go?" her dad asked, a knowing twinkle in his eye. Holly sighed, sinking further into the plush armchair. "It was challenging. Finn MacLeod has some very different ideas about the Christmas festival." "Finn?" Lily piped up. "Is he the cute one with the blue eyes?" "Lily!" Holly exclaimed, feeling a blush creep up her neck. He's just the town manager, and he's not exactly warm and fuzzy." Her mom chuckled. "Give him time, dear. Some people take a while to warm up to Thistledown's charm." As the conversation flowed, Holly found herself relaxing for the first time in months. She shared stories from the city, laughed at Lily's school adventures, and soaked in the love and support of her family. Later that evening, as Holly unpacked in her old room, Lily perched on the bed, peppering her with questions. "Are you going to stay after Christmas?" Lily asked, hope shining in her eyes. Holly paused, a sweater half folded in her hands. I don't know, Lil. My job is back in the city." "But don't you miss us? Don't you miss Thistledown?" The question hit Holly harder than she expected. Did she miss it? The hustle and bustle of city life had its appeal, but there was something about Thistledown that tugged at her heartstrings. "I do miss you," Holly admitted, sitting next to her sister. "And being back. It feels right somehow." Lily beamed, throwing her arms around Holly. "Then stay. You can plan all our town events. It'll be perfect." Holly laughed, ruffling Lily's hair. "It's not that simple, Squirt, but let's focus on making this the best Christmas festival ever, okay?" As Lily chattered on about her ideas for the festival, Holly's mind wandered to her meeting with Finn. Despite their disagreements, she couldn't deny there was something intriguing about him. His dedication to the town, even if misguided, was admirable. Meanwhile, across town, Finn was having a very different evening. He sat in his sparsely decorated apartment, takeout container in hand, as he scrolled through emails on his laptop. A knock at the door interrupted his solitude. "It's open, Ben," he called out, recognizing his friend's distinct pattern of knocks. Benjamin Wallace strode in, shaking his head at the sad scene before him. "Finn, my friend, you need to get out more." Finn rolled his eyes. "I'm busy, Ben. The Christmas festival isn't going to plan itself." "Ah, yes, the festival," Benjamin said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "And how was your meeting with the lovely Miss Grant?" Finn tried to ignore the way his heart quickened at the mention of Holly's name. "It was productive. She has some interesting ideas." "Just interesting?" Benjamin pressed. "Word around town is that sparks were flying in the square today." "Sparks? Don't be ridiculous," Finn scoffed, though he could feel heat rising to his cheeks. "We simply had a professional discussion about the festival plans." Benjamin laughed, clapping Finn on the shoulder. "Whatever you say, my friend. Just remember, it's okay to let people in sometimes. This town has a way of working its magic on even the most stubborn of hearts." As Benjamin left, Finn found himself staring out the window at the twinkling lights of Thistledown. Holly's enthusiasm for the town was infectious, he had to admit. And her smile. Finn shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He had a job to do, a town to modernize. He couldn't let himself get distracted by a pair of warm brown eyes and a dazzling smile. But as he turned back to his work, Finn couldn't shake the feeling that this Christmas festival might just change everything, for the town and for him. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. 106. 6. Chapter 6. 106. Chapter 6. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Holly found herself trudging through the fresh snow towards the town's community center. Her arms were laden with boxes filled with tinsel, ornaments, and strings of lights. Despite the early hour and the biting cold, she couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Today was the day they'd start gathering supplies for the festival. As she approached the building, she was surprised to see a familiar figure already waiting by the door. Wynn MacLeod stood there, 2 steaming travel mugs in his gloved hands. "Good morning, Holly," he said, offering her one of the mugs. "I thought you might need this." Holly blinked in surprise, juggling her boxes to accept the coffee. "Thank you, Finn. I didn't expect to see you here so early." A ghost of a smile played on his lips. "I'm always early. Besides, I wanted to make sure we're on the same page before the volunteers arrive." They made their way inside, the warmth of the building a welcome respite from the cold. As they set up tables and began organizing supplies, Holly found herself stealing glances at Finn. In the soft morning light, his usually stern features seemed softer, more approachable. "So," Holly began, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them, "what made you decide to become a town manager, especially for a small town like Thistledown?" Finn paused in his task of untangling a string of lights. For a moment, Holly thought he might not answer. "I wanted to make a difference," he said finally, his voice quiet. "In the city, I was just another cog in the machine. Here, I can see the impact of my work every day." Holly nodded, understanding all too well the allure of that kind of satisfaction. "I get that. It's why I love event planning. Seeing people's faces light up, knowing I helped create that joy, there's nothing like it." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Holly felt a connection she hadn't expected. Maybe they weren't so different after all. The moment was broken by the arrival of the first volunteers. Soon, the community center was buzzing with activity. Holly found herself in her element, directing people, answering questions, and problem-solving on the fly. She was in the middle of showing a group how to properly fluff artificial pine garlands when she heard a commotion near the craft supply table. She looked up to see Finn, his usually impeccable suit dusted with glitter, holding a broken snow globe. Without thinking, Holly grabbed a handful of tissues and hurried over. "Here, let me help," she said, dabbing at the water and glitter on his jacket. Finn stood still, a look of bemusement on his face. "I was just trying to move it to a safer spot," he explained, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. Holly couldn't help but laugh. "Welcome to the chaos of festival planning, Mr. MacLeod. It's not all spreadsheets and budgets, you know." To her surprise, Finn chuckled. "I'm beginning to see that. Perhaps I underestimated the hands-on nature of this job." As they cleaned up the mess together, Holly found herself relaxing around Finn in a way she hadn't before. She even managed to coax a full laugh out of him when she jokingly suggested they market Glitter-Dusted Finn as the festival's new mascot. The rest of the morning flew by in a whirlwind of activity. By the time the last volunteer left, the community center looked like Santa's workshop had exploded inside it. Boxes of decorations were stacked neatly, craft supplies were organized by color, and a master list of needed items hung proudly on the wall. Holly and Finn stood side by side, surveying their work. "Not bad for a day's work," Holly said, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. Finn nodded, a small smile on his face. "Indeed, you have quite a talent for organization, Holly." "High praise coming from you," she teased, nudging him gently with her elbow. As they locked up the community center and stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, Holly felt a twinge of regret that their time together was ending. "Well," Finn said, clearing his throat, "I suppose I'll see you at the next planning meeting." Holly nodded, suddenly feeling shy. "Right, of course. Thanks for your help today, Finn. It really made a difference." As she watched him walk away, his tall figure cutting a path through the snow, Holly couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. The stern, unapproachable town manager she'd met just days ago was giving way to someone far more complex and intriguing. Finn was having similar thoughts as he made his way back to his office. The glitter still clinging to his suit was a tangible reminder of the morning's unexpected turn of events. For the first time since moving to Thistledown, he found himself looking forward to the next festival planning session. And if he smiled a little more than usual for the rest of the day, well, he'd blame it on the lingering effects of the broken snow globe. Definitely not on the way Holly's eyes had lit up when she laughed, or how her presence had made the tedious task of organizing supplies feel almost fun. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. 107. 7. Chapter 777. Chapter 7. The crisp morning air nipped at Holly's cheeks as she hurried towards the town hall. Her mind was buzzing with ideas for the festival, each step bringing a new burst of inspiration. As she reached for the door handle, it swung open unexpectedly, nearly causing her to collide with the person exiting. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Holly's apology caught in her throat as she realized who she'd almost run into. Mayor Jenkins. Rachel Jenkins, Thistledown's beloved mayor, offered a warm but strained smile. "Good morning, Holly. It's wonderful to see you back in town. I assume you're here for the festival meeting." Holly nodded, noticing the worry lines creasing the mayor's forehead. "Is everything all right, Mayor Jenkins?" The older woman hesitated, then sighed. "Why don't you come to my office for a moment? There's something you and Finn should know before the meeting starts." Anxiety gnawed at Holly's stomach as she followed the mayor back inside. They found Finn already waiting in the mayor's office, his usual stoic expression tinged with concern. "What's going on?" Finn asked, as Holly took the seat next to him. Mayor Jenkins settled behind her desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I'm afraid I have some bad news about the festival budget," she began, her voice heavy. "Due to some unexpected infrastructure repairs, we've had to make significant cuts across all departments. The Christmas parade? I'm sorry, but we simply can't afford it this year." The words hit Holly like a punch to the gut. The parade was the cornerstone of the Thistledown Christmas Festival, a beloved tradition that brought the entire town together. "But Mayor," Holly protested, leaning forward in her chair, "the parade is what draws most of our out-of-town visitors. It's a huge boost for local businesses." Finn, to Holly's surprise, nodded in agreement. "Not to mention the morale boost it provides for the townspeople," he added. "Surely there must be some way to reallocate funds?" Mayor Jenkins shook her head sadly. "I've looked at the numbers from every angle. Unless we can find an additional $15,000, the parade is off the table." A heavy silence fell over the room. Holly's mind raced, trying to come up with a solution. She glanced at Finn, noticing the deep furrow in his brow as he too seemed lost in thought. "What if—" Holly began slowly, an idea forming. "What if we raised the money ourselves?" Finn's head snapped up, his blue eyes meeting hers with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. "How do you propose we do that?" "A fundraiser," Holly said, her excitement growing as the idea took shape. "We could host a series of events leading up to the festival, a bake sale, a craft fair, maybe even a charity auction. If we get the whole town involved, I bet we could raise that money in no time." Mayor Jenkins looked thoughtful. "It's certainly an interesting idea, but organizing something like that on top of the regular festival planning, it would be a lot of work." "We can handle it," Finn said, his voice firm. Holly turned to him in surprise, a warmth spreading through her chest at his use of "we." "If Holly's willing to take the lead on the fundraising events, I can make sure the rest of the festival planning stays on track." Holly nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. We can't let the parade be canceled, Mayor. It means too much to the town." After a moment's consideration, Mayor Jenkins smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "All right, then. If you two think you can pull this off, you have my full support. But remember, time is of the essence. We need that money before we can commit to any parade-related expenses." As they left the mayor's office, Holly felt a mix of determination and anxiety swirling in her stomach. She glanced at Finn, who seemed lost in thought. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "looks like we have our work cut out for us." Finn nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Indeed we do. I have to admit, I'm impressed by your quick thinking in there, Holly." Holly felt a blush creep up her cheeks at the unexpected compliment. "Thanks. I just couldn't bear the thought of Christmas without the parade. It's been a part of Thistledown for as long as I can remember." "Well," Finn said, checking his watch, "we should get to the meeting. But perhaps we could grab coffee afterwards to start brainstorming fundraiser ideas?" Holly's breath caught in her throat. Was Finn MacLeod actually suggesting they spend time together outside of official meetings? "That sounds great," she managed to say, hoping her voice didn't betray her surprise and excitement. As they walked into the conference room, where the rest of the festival committee was waiting, Holly was overcome by a powerful spark of optimism. Yes, they had a huge challenge ahead of them, but somehow, knowing that she and Finn would be tackling it together made it seem a little less daunting. The race to save Thistledown's Christmas parade had begun. It was a journey that would test their resolve, challenge their perspectives, and push them to work together in ways they hadn't expected. As Holly took her seat at the table, stealing one last glance at Finn, she felt ready to face whatever obstacles lay ahead. With determination in her heart and a growing appreciation for her unlikely partner, she was prepared to give this fundraising effort everything she had. Chapter 8. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the cozy interior of Grace's bakery as Holly and Finn huddled over a table, surrounded by notes and idea-filled napkins. The warm glow of fairy lights strung across the windows created a stark contrast to the gray, overcast sky outside. "All right," Holly said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "We've got the bake sale, the craft fair, and the charity auction. But we need something big, something to really draw people in." Finn nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What about a winter carnival? We could set up games, food stalls, maybe even a small ice rink in the town square." Holly's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant, Finn. We could charge for tickets and have local businesses sponsor different attractions." As they continued brainstorming, Grace approached their table with a fresh pot of coffee. "You two have been at it for hours," she said, refilling their mugs. "Any progress on saving our parade?" Holly smiled up at her friend. "We're getting there, but we could use your help, Grace. Would you be willing to coordinate the bake sale portion of our fundraiser?" "Of course!" Grace exclaimed. "I'll rally all the local bakers. We'll have so many pies and cookies, you won't know what to do with them all." As Grace walked away, Finn leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, we should leverage social media for this. Create a hashtag, encourage people to share their Thistledown Christmas memories online." Holly blinked in surprise. "I didn't peg you for a social media guru, Finn." He shrugged, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I may be pushing for modernization, but that doesn't mean I'm completely out of touch." Their eyes met, and Holly felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee she'd been drinking. There was something about seeing this different side of Finn that made her heart beat a little faster. The moment was broken by the chiming of Finn's phone. He glanced at it and sighed. "I have to go. Town budget meeting." As they gathered their notes, Holly was surprised to find herself feeling a twinge of disappointment that their planning session was ending. "So, same time tomorrow to finalize the details?" Finn nodded, then hesitated. "Actually, I was thinking, my place has a bit more room to spread out. We could order in and really dive into the logistics. If you're comfortable with that, of course." Holly felt a flutter in her stomach. "That sounds great. I'll bring dessert from Grace's." As Finn left the bakery, Holly found herself watching him go, a smile lingering on her face. She turned to find Grace giving her a knowing look. "What?" Holly asked, feeling her cheeks warm. Grace grinned. "Oh, nothing. Just noticing how well you and Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome seem to be getting along." Holly rolled her eyes, but couldn't completely hide her smile. We're just working together to save the parade, that's all. Grace hummed, unconvinced. Well, whatever it is, it's nice to see you both smiling more. As Holly gathered her things to leave, she couldn't shake the anticipation she felt for tomorrow's planning session. She told herself it was just excitement about the fundraiser coming together. But deep down, she knew there was more to it than that. The next evening, Holly found herself standing outside Finn's apartment, a box of Grace's famous apple turnovers in hand. She took a deep breath and knocked. Finn opened the door, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in a soft sweater and jeans. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "I hope you like Thai food." As they spread their work across Finn's dining table, diving into the details of their fundraising plan between bites of pad thai, Holly found herself unexpectedly feeling like something had shifted between them. The initial tension and disagreements had given way to a comfortable rhythm, their different perspectives now complementing each other rather than clashing. Hours passed as they worked, their excitement growing as the plan took shape. It wasn't until Holly glanced at her watch that she realized how late it had gotten. "Oh wow, it's past midnight," she said, stifling a yawn. "I should probably head home." Finn looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Is it really that late?" Time flew by. As Holly gathered her things, Finn walked her to the door. There was a moment of awkward silence as they stood there, neither quite sure how to say goodnight. "Thank you for tonight," Holly said softly. "I think we make a pretty good team." Finn's eyes met hers, a warmth in them she hadn't seen before. "We do, don't we?" As Holly made her way home through the quiet, snow-dusted streets of Thistledown, she couldn't stop smiling. The challenge of saving the parade still loomed large, but somehow, with Finn by her side, it all seemed possible. Chapter 9. The town square bustled with activity as Holly oversaw the setup for their first fundraising event. Colorful banners announcing the Save the Thistledown Christmas Parade campaign fluttered in the crisp morning breeze. Volunteers scurried about, setting up booths for the bake sale and craft fair. Holly checked her watch for the third time in as many minutes. Finn was late, which was unlike him. Just as she was about to call him, she spotted his tall figure hurrying across the square. "I'm so sorry," Finn said, slightly out of breath as he reached her. "There was an emergency at the community center. A pipe burst, and I had to coordinate the repairs." Holly's annoyance melted away at the sight of his flustered expression. "It's okay. You're here now. Let's get started." As they worked side by side, directing volunteers and solving last-minute crises, Holly couldn't help but notice how in sync they had become. They moved around each other with an easy familiarity, anticipating each other's needs without having to speak. By midday, the square was filled with townspeople and visitors alike. The scent of fresh-baked goods wafted through the air, mingling with the excited chatter of the crowd. Holly stood back, watching with pride as people lined up at the various booths. "We did it," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "We're not done yet," Finn reminded her, appearing at her side. "But yes, this is a good start." As the afternoon wore on, Holly found herself at the dunk tank, where Finn had reluctantly agreed to be the target. She couldn't help but laugh at the sight of him, perched on the seat in a ridiculous Santa hat, trying to maintain his dignity. "Come on, Holly," he called out, a challenge in his eyes. "Think you can hit the target?" Holly grinned, picking up a ball. "Oh, you're going down, MacLeod." She took aim and threw, missing the target by inches. Finn's smug smile only fueled her determination. On her third try, the ball hit home. Finn's look of surprise quickly turned to a yelp as he plunged into the icy water. As he emerged, spluttering and shaking water from his hair, their eyes met. For a moment, the noise of the crowd faded away. Holly felt her heart skip a beat at the sight of Finn, his usually perfectly coiffed hair plastered to his forehead, a genuine laugh escaping his lips. Later, as the sun began to set and the crowd thinned, Holly and Finn found themselves sitting on a bench, exhausted but content. "I can't believe how much we raised today," Holly said, looking over the tally sheet. "We're almost halfway to our goal already." Finn nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. It was a good day. You should be proud, Holly. This was your idea, after all. A wave of cozy contentment washed over Holly at his words. We did this together, Finn. I couldn't have pulled it off without you. A comfortable silence fell between them. Holly found herself studying Finn's profile, illuminated by the soft glow of the Christmas lights strung around the square. There was something about him in this moment, relaxed, slightly disheveled from his dunk tank experience. That made him seem more human, more approachable. Can I ask you something? Holly said softly, breaking the silence. Finn turned to her, his blue eyes curious. Of course. Why did you really come to Thistledown? I mean, a town manager position in a small town doesn't seem like the obvious choice for someone with your qualifications. Finn was quiet for a long moment, and Holly worried she'd overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice low and tinged with an emotion she couldn't quite place. I needed a fresh start, he admitted. My last job, it didn't end well. I made some mistakes, trusted the wrong people. When the truth came out, I was the one left holding the bag. Holly listened, her heart aching for the pain she could hear in his voice. Thistledown offered me a chance to rebuild, Finn continued, to prove to myself that I could make a difference, do things right. Without thinking, Holly reached out and placed her hand over his. You are making a difference, Finn. This town is lucky to have you. Finn looked down at their hands, then back up at Holly. The vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. What about you? He asked softly. Why did you leave Thistledown? It was Holly's turn to pause, memories flooding back. I thought I needed more. Bigger cities, bigger events. I wanted to prove I could make it in the real world. She laughed softly. But being back here, doing this, I'm starting to think maybe I had it backwards. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Holly felt something shift between them. The last of the barriers they'd built around themselves seemed to crumble away. As they sat there, hand in hand, surrounded by the twinkling lights and the remnants of their successful fundraiser, Holly realized that Thistledown had worked its magic once again. In trying to save the town's beloved parade, she and Finn had found something neither of them had been looking for, a connection that felt real and deep and full of possibility. The Christmas festival was still weeks away, but Holly couldn't help feeling that the real gift of the season had already arrived, right here on this bench in the town square. Chapter 10. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Holly and Finn threw themselves into organizing the remaining fundraising events. Their shared vulnerability in the town square had brought them closer, creating an easy camaraderie that didn't go unnoticed by the townspeople. On a particularly chilly morning, they found themselves in Finn's office, poring over the latest budget numbers for the winter carnival. If we move the ice rink to the park instead of the square, we can save on setup costs, Finn mused, tapping his pen against the desk. Holly nodded, leaning in to look at the figures. Good idea. And maybe we can get the high school art club to help with decorations? That would cut down on expenses, too. As they worked, their heads bent close together over the papers, there was a knock at the door. They looked up to see Benjamin, Finn's colleague, standing in the doorway with an amused expression. Sorry to interrupt, Benjamin said, a hint of a smirk on his face. Just wanted to drop off these permit forms for the carnival. Thanks, Ben, Finn replied, seemingly oblivious to his friend's knowing look. After Benjamin left, Holly couldn't help but chuckle. I think your friend has the wrong idea about us. Finn raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what idea is that? Holly felt a blush creep up her cheeks. You know, that we're more than just colleagues. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Finn's blue eyes met hers, a softness in them that made Holly's heart skip a beat. Would that be such a bad thing? Finn asked quietly. Before Holly could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Emergency at the bakery. Need help ASAP. Holly jumped up, torn between the moment with Finn and her friend's need. I'm sorry, I have to go. Grace needs me at the bakery. Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, go ahead. We can finish this later." As Holly rushed out, her mind was spinning. What had just happened? What would she have said if Grace hadn't texted? At the bakery, she found Grace in a panic. A large order for the upcoming bake sale had been mixed up, and they now had dozens of the wrong type of pastries. "Oh, Holly, thank goodness you're here," Grace said, flour dusting her cheeks. "I don't know how we're going to fix this in time." Holly rolled up her sleeves, pushing thoughts of Finn to the back of her mind. "Don't worry, we've got this. Let's get baking." Hours passed in a blur of flour, sugar, and frantic mixing. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the bakery windows, Holly and Grace finally stepped back to survey their work. Trays of perfectly baked goods lined every available surface. "We did it," Grace sighed, wiping her brow. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Hole." Holly smiled, exhausted but satisfied. "What are friends for?" As they cleaned up, Grace gave Holly a sidelong glance. "So, are we going to talk about what's going on with you and Finn?" Holly nearly dropped the mixing bowl she was washing. "What? There's nothing going on." Grace's knowing smile said she didn't believe a word of it. "Uh-huh. That's why you two have been practically joined at the hip for weeks, and why you came rushing in here earlier looking like you'd seen a ghost." Holly sighed, knowing she couldn't hide anything from her best friend. "I don't know, Grace. It's complicated. We work together, and he's so different from anyone I've ever—" She trailed off, not sure how to explain the mix of emotions Finn stirred in her. Grace put a comforting hand on Holly's shoulder. "Sometimes the best things in life are complicated, honey. But from what I've seen, that man looks at you like you hung the moon and stars." A gentle warmth kindled deep within Holly at Grace's words. "You really think so?" "I know so," Grace replied with a wink. "Now, why don't you take some of these pastries and go finish whatever conversation you and Finn were having earlier?" With a burst of courage, Holly gathered a box of still-warm cinnamon rolls and headed back to the town hall. Her heart raced as she approached Finn's office, only to find it dark and empty. Disappointed, she was about to leave when she heard footsteps behind her. "Holly?" Finn's voice sent a shiver down her spine. "What are you doing here so late?" She turned to find him standing there, his coat draped over his arm, surprise and something else, hope, in his eyes. "I, brought some cinnamon rolls," Holly said, holding up the box. "I thought maybe we could finish our conversation from earlier." A slow smile spread across Finn's face, lighting up his features in a way that made Holly's breath catch. "I'd like that," he said softly. "Why don't we take a walk? The Christmas lights in the square should be on by now." As they stepped out into the crisp night air, the twinkling lights of the town square before them, Holly felt a sense of anticipation. Whatever happened next, she knew that this Christmas in Thistledown was going to be one she'd never forget. Chapter 11. The following week brought a flurry of activity as Holly and Finn worked tirelessly to bring their winter carnival to life. The town square was gradually transforming into a wonderland of twinkling lights, festive booths, and the centerpiece, a magnificent Christmas tree that seemed to touch the sky. Holly stood in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers and checking off tasks. She couldn't help but smile as she watched Finn across the square, his usually pristine suit replaced by jeans and a warm sweater, as he helped set up the stage for the upcoming performances. "Holly!" Grace's voice cut through the bustle. "You've got to see this." Holly hurried over to where her friend was standing, staring at her phone with a worried expression. "What is it?" Holly asked, peering at the screen. Grace held up the phone, displaying a weather app. "There's a massive snowstorm headed our way. It's supposed to hit the day of the carnival." Holly's heart sank. They had put so much work into this event, and it was crucial for reaching their fundraising goal. "How bad are we talking?" "At least a foot of snow, maybe more. High winds, too," Grace replied, her voice laced with concern. Holly's mind raced. They couldn't cancel the carnival, not when they were so close to saving the parade. But how could they possibly hold an outdoor event in such conditions? "We need to talk to Finn," Holly decided, already scanning the square for him. They found Finn near the hot chocolate stand, going over last-minute details with the vendor. His face grew serious as they explained the situation. "This could be a disaster," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We can't risk people's safety, but canceling isn't an option either." Holly nodded in agreement. "Maybe we could move some of the activities indoors? The community center, the school gym?" Finn's eyes lit up. "That's not a bad idea. We'd need to completely restructure the layout, though, and figure out how to transport all the decorations and equipment." As they brainstormed solutions, Holly couldn't help but notice how in sync she and Finn had become. They finished each other's sentences, building on each other's ideas effortlessly. It was as if the looming crisis had crystallized their partnership into something even stronger. The next few days were a whirlwind of reorganization. Holly and Finn worked around the clock, calling in favors, rearranging schedules, and somehow managing to secure indoor venues for most of the carnival activities. On the eve of the carnival, they found themselves in Finn's office, surrounded by maps, schedules, and empty coffee cups. "I think we've done all we can," Holly said, stifling a yawn. "Now we just have to hope for the best." Finn nodded, looking equally exhausted. "You've been amazing through all of this, Holly. I don't think I could have handled it without you." Their eyes met, and Holly felt that familiar flutter in her chest. They had grown so close over the past weeks, but there was still an unspoken tension between them, a line neither had dared to cross. "Finn, Holly began, but was cut off by the shrill ring of Finn's phone. He answered, his expression growing more concerned by the second. "I see. Yes, I'll be right there." Hanging up, he turned to Holly with a grim look. "That was the mayor. The storm's moving in faster than expected. We need to start moving everything indoors now if we want any chance of being ready by tomorrow." Holly's heart sank. Their moment, whatever it might have been, was gone. "Right. Of course. I'll start calling the volunteers." As they rushed out into the night, the first snowflakes beginning to fall, Holly couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting against more than just the weather. The carnival, the parade, her growing feelings for Finn, it all seemed to be hanging by a thread. The wind picked up, whipping snow around them as they hurried towards the town square. Holly pulled her coat tighter, stealing a glance at Finn's determined profile. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. They would face them together. As they reached the square and began directing the emergency relocation efforts, Holly silently prayed that their hard work wouldn't be in vain. The success of the carnival wasn't just about saving a parade anymore. It had become a testament to what she and Finn could accomplish together, a symbol of the connection they had forged. With the storm closing in and the clock ticking down, Holly steeled herself for a long night ahead. The true test of their partnership, and perhaps something more, was only just beginning. Chapter 12. The storm raged through the night, transforming Thistledown into a winter wonderland, beautiful but treacherous. Holly awoke to a world blanketed in white, the wind howling outside her window. She checked her phone, relieved to see a text from Finn. "Still on. Meet at the community center in an hour." Bundled up against the cold, Holly trudged through the snow-covered streets. The usually bustling town was eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of a snowplow in the distance. As she approached the community center, she saw a small crowd gathered outside. Finn stood at the center, his tall frame easy to spot. He was speaking to a group of volunteers, his breath visible in the frigid air. When he caught sight of Holly, relief washed over his face. "Thank goodness you're here," he said as she joined the group. "We've got our work cut out for us." Inside, the community center was a hive of activity. Volunteers scurried about, setting up booths and hanging decorations. The space was cramped, nothing like the open expanse of the town square they had originally planned for. "It's not ideal," Finn admitted as he and Holly surveyed the scene, "but it's the best we can do under the circumstances." Holly nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. "We can make this work. Let's focus on creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere. It'll be like a winter hideaway." As the morning wore on, they tackled one challenge after another. The face painting booth was set up in a quiet corner, the bake sale found a home near the entrance, and they managed to create a small area for children's games. By early afternoon, despite the continuing storm outside, people began to arrive. Families with excited children, elderly couples arm in arm, teenagers looking for something to do on a snow day. They all filed into the community center, bringing with them a buzz of excitement. Holly watched from near the hot chocolate stand as Finn welcomed Mayor Jenkins. The older woman looked around with wide eyes, taking in the transformed space. "I can't believe you pulled this off," the mayor said, her voice filled with awe. "When I saw the weather report, I thought for sure we'd have to cancel." Finn smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "We have Holly to thank for that. This was all her idea." A flush of warm emotion suffused Holly at his words. As if sensing her gaze, Finn looked up, their eyes meeting across the room. He gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared accomplishment. The carnival was in full swing, the close quarters creating an atmosphere of warmth and community that might have been lost in a larger space. Children laughed as they played carnival games, the aroma of fresh-baked goods filled the air, and the sound of holiday music provided a cheerful backdrop. As the day progressed, Holly found herself constantly crossing paths with Finn. They worked in perfect sync, anticipating each other's needs and solving problems before they could escalate. More than once, Holly caught herself admiring the way Finn's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how his hand felt when it brushed against hers as they reached for the same decorations. Late in the afternoon, as the carnival began to wind down, Holly stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a pristine landscape of untouched snow. She heard the crunch of footsteps behind her and turned to see Finn approaching. "Quite a view, isn't it?" he said, coming to stand beside her. Holly nodded, taking in the beauty of their snow-covered town. "It's magical." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, their breath mingling in the cold air. "Holly," Finn began, his voice soft, "I want to thank you. Not just for today, but for everything. You've shown me a side of Thistledown I never appreciated before. You've made me see things differently." Holly turned to face him, her heart racing. "Finn, But before she could finish, the door burst open behind them. "There you are!" Grace called out. "We need you both inside. It's time for the final tally." The moment broken, Holly and Finn shared a look of mingled disappointment and amusement before following Grace back inside. As they gathered with the other organizers to count the day's earnings, Holly was struck by a sudden mix of emotions. They had overcome so much to make this carnival happen, and the turnout had been better than they could have hoped for, given the circumstances. But there was also a sense of something left unfinished, words left unspoken between her and Finn. As the final numbers were tallied, a cheer went up from the crowd. They had done it. They had raised enough money to save the Christmas parade. In the midst of the celebration, Holly's eyes found Finn's across the room. His smile was wide and genuine, a look of pure joy that made her heart skip a beat. In that moment, she realized that they had accomplished more than just saving a parade. They had built something together, something that felt a lot like the beginning of a beautiful partnership, and maybe something more. As the carnival-goers began to file out into the snowy evening, Holly knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Finn would face them together. The obstacles they had overcome had only made their bond stronger, and she couldn't wait to see what the rest of the Christmas season would bring. Chapter 13. The day after the carnival, Holly woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. Blinking away sleep, she reached for it, surprised to see multiple missed calls from Finn. Her heart raced as she quickly dialed him back. "Holly!" Finn's voice came through, a mix of relief and urgency. "I'm sorry to wake you, but we have a situation." Fully alert now, Holly sat up. "What's wrong?" "The storm did more damage than we thought. The roof of the old community theater partially collapsed under the weight of the snow. It's where we were planning to hold the Christmas pageant next week." Holly's mind raced. The pageant was a cornerstone of the Thistledown Christmas Festival, almost as important as the parade itself. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that it won't be usable in time," Finn sighed. "I hate to ask, but—" "I'm on my way," Holly interrupted. already getting out of bed. Meet you at the town hall in 30 minutes? She could hear the smile in Finn's voice as he replied, I'll bring the coffee. 30 minutes later, Holly hurried into Finn's office, cheeks flushed from the cold. True to his word, Finn had a steaming cup of coffee waiting for her. So, Holly said, warming her hands on the mug, what are our options? Finn ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Holly had come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. That's the problem. We're running out of indoor venues large enough to host the pageant. The school gymnasium is already booked for a basketball tournament, and the community center is too small. Holly nodded, her mind already working on solutions. What about the old barn at the Johnson farm? It's spacious, and with some decorations, it could be quite charming. Finn's eyes lit up. That's actually a great idea, but it would need a lot of work to get it ready in time. Then we better get started, Holly said with determination. I'll call the Johnsons and see if they're willing to let us use the barn. Can you start putting together a team of volunteers? As they sprang into action, Holly couldn't help but marvel at how seamlessly they worked together. Where once there had been tension and disagreement, now there was a fluid partnership, each anticipating the other's needs and building on their ideas. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The Johnsons enthusiastically agreed to let them use the barn, and the whole town seemed to rally around the effort to transform it into a magical venue for the pageant. Holly and Finn were at the center of it all, coordinating volunteers, solving logistical challenges, and somehow finding moments of laughter amidst the chaos. One evening, as they were stringing lights across the barn's rafters, Holly found herself admiring the way the soft glow illuminated Finn's features. He must have sensed her gaze because he turned, catching her eye with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. What? He asked, a hint of playfulness in his voice. Holly felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Nothing, I'm glad we're doing this together. Finn's expression softened. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind Holly's ear. The touch sent a shiver down her spine. Me too, he said softly. The moment was interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat. They turned to see Mayor Jenkins standing in the doorway, an amused expression on her face. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her eyes twinkling. I just wanted to see how things were progressing. As Holly and Finn gave her a tour of the transformed barn, explaining their plans for the pageant, Holly couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. The unspoken tension that had been building for weeks felt like it was reaching a breaking point. Later that night, as they were locking up the barn, Finn turned to Holly. Listen, I was thinking, once all this is over, maybe we could... He was cut off by the sound of Holly's phone ringing. She answered it, her expression growing serious as she listened. I'm so sorry, she said as she hung up. That was my sister. There's a family emergency back home. I have to go. Finn's face fell, but he quickly masked it with concern. Of course. Is everything okay? Holly nodded, her mind already racing with travel plans. It will be. I just need to be there for a few days. But the pageant... Don't worry about the pageant, Finn assured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We've got a great team here. Go take care of your family. We'll manage until you get back. As Holly packed her bags that night, her emotions were in turmoil. She was worried about her family, of course, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving something unfinished in Thistledown, something that had been growing between her and Finn. As she boarded the train the next morning, Holly looked out at the snow-covered landscape of Thistledown. She couldn't help but wonder what she would be coming back to, and whether the magic of the season would still be there when she returned. Chapter 14. The train rattled along the tracks, carrying Holly further and further from Thistledown. She stared out the window, watching the snowy landscape blur by, her mind a whirlwind of worry and conflicting emotions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Finn. Hope you arrived safely. Everything under control here. Take care of your family. We've got this. Holly smiled despite her anxiety. Finn's steady presence, even from afar, was comforting. She typed back a quick thanks, then settled in for the long journey. Meanwhile, back in Thistledown, Finn stood in the middle of the transformed barn, feeling Holly's absence acutely. The space seemed emptier somehow, despite the bustle of volunteers around him. "All right, everyone," he called out, clapping his hands to get their attention. "We've got a lot to do and not much time. Let's make Holly proud when she gets back." The next few days were a flurry of activity. Finn threw himself into the preparations, working longer hours than ever. He coordinated with the pageant director, oversaw the installation of temporary heating in the barn, and even found himself helping with costume alterations, a task he never imagined he'd be doing. Every evening, he'd send Holly an update, keeping her in the loop about their progress. Her responses, though brief due to her family situation, always brought a smile to his face. On the third day of Holly's absence, disaster struck. The delivery truck carrying the crucial sound equipment for the pageant skidded on an icy road, ending up in a ditch. The equipment was undamaged, but the truck wouldn't be moving anytime soon. Finn stood at the site, the cold wind whipping around him, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This was the kind of situation where Holly's quick thinking and boundless optimism would have been invaluable. Taking a deep breath, he channeled his inner Holly. What would she do? He muttered to himself. An idea struck him. He pulled out his phone and made a call. An hour later, a convoy of pickup trucks driven by local farmers arrived at the scene. With their help, the sound equipment was carefully transferred and transported to the barn. As Finn oversaw the unloading, he felt a surge of pride and gratitude. This was what Holly had been trying to show him all along, the power of community, the way this town came together in times of need. That evening, as he sat in his office reviewing the final preparations for the pageant, Finn's phone rang. His heart leapt when he saw Holly's name on the screen. "Holly," he answered, unable to keep the warmth from his voice. "How are you? How's your family?" "We're doing better, thank you," Holly replied, sounding tired but relieved. "I should be able to come back tomorrow. How are things there? I saw your messages about the truck incident. That must have been stressful." Finn chuckled. "It was, but you know what? We handled it. The whole town pitched in. It was pretty amazing, actually." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Holly spoke again, her voice was soft with emotion. "I wish I could have seen that. Finn, I'm so proud of you, of everyone. I can't wait to get back." "We can't wait to have you back," Finn said, then added more quietly, "I can't wait." Another pause, loaded with unspoken feelings. "Finn, when I get back, I think we should talk. About everything." Finn's heart raced. "Yes, I think we should. Safe travels, Holly. See you soon." As he hung up, Finn felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Whatever this thing was between him and Holly, it was clear they couldn't ignore it any longer. The next morning, Finn stood on the platform of Thistledown Station, a cup of coffee in each hand, waiting for Holly's train to arrive. As it pulled into the station, he felt his pulse quicken. Holly stepped off the train, her face lighting up when she saw him. Without hesitation, she walked straight into his arms, the coffee cups forgotten as Finn embraced her. "Welcome home," he murmured into her hair. Holly pulled back slightly, looking up at him with shining eyes. "Home," she repeated softly. "You know, I think I'm starting to understand what that really means." As they walked arm in arm towards the town square, the Christmas lights twinkling around them, both knew that their partnership had evolved into something much deeper. The pageant, the festival, the future of Thistledown. It all seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility. The challenges weren't over, but together they felt ready to face whatever came next. As they approached the transformed barn, ready to put the finishing touches on their labor of love, Holly and Finn shared a look of understanding. This Christmas in Thistledown was turning out to be more magical than either of them could have ever imagined. Chapter 15. The day of the Christmas pageant arrived, bringing with it a renewed sense of excitement throughout Thistledown. The transformed barn buzzed with activity as last-minute preparations were made. Holly and Finn worked side by side, their movements synchronized after weeks of collaboration. As Holly adjusted a wreath near the entrance, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with Sandra, her boss from the city. "Sandra?" Holly exclaimed, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Sandra smiled, her eyes taking in the festive decorations. "I came to see your handiwork, of course, and to talk about your future with the company." A wave of nervous energy washed over Holly. She had been so caught up in the festival and her growing feelings for Finn that she'd almost forgotten about her life back in the city. "Why don't we step outside for a moment?" Sandra suggested. As they walked into the crisp winter air, Holly caught Finn's questioning glance. She gave him a reassuring smile before following Sandra. "Holly, I'll cut to the chase," Sandra began once they were alone. "The board was impressed with how you handled this event, especially given the challenges you faced. We want to offer you a promotion." Holly's eyes widened. "A promotion?" Sandra nodded enthusiastically. "Senior event planner. You'd be handling our biggest clients, international events. It's a significant step up with a substantial raise." As Sandra continued to outline the details of the offer, Holly felt a growing sense of conflict. Just days ago, this would have been a dream come true. But now, as she glanced back at the barn where Finn was directing volunteers, she wasn't so sure. "This is... wow," Holly managed. "Can I have some time to think about it?" "Of course," Sandra replied. "But we'll need an answer by the end of the week. This is a big opportunity, Holly. Don't let it slip away." As Sandra left, Holly leaned against a nearby tree, her mind reeling. The promotion was everything she had worked for, but the thought of leaving Thistledown, of leaving Finn, made her heart ache. Inside the barn, Finn had noticed Holly's prolonged absence. He stepped outside, his concern growing when he saw her troubled expression. "Holly, is everything okay?" he asked, approaching her. She looked up, forcing a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just catching up with my boss from the city." Finn's brow furrowed. "Your boss? What did she want?" Holly hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. She offered me a promotion. Senior event planner, handling international events." Finn's face fell for a moment before he quickly composed himself. That's great, Holly. Congratulations." "I haven't accepted yet," Holly said quickly. "I told her I needed time to think about it." An awkward silence fell between them. The unspoken question hung in the air. What about us? Before either could address it, they were interrupted by the arrival of the first pageant attendees. Pushing their personal concerns aside, Holly and Finn threw themselves into ensuring the event's success. The pageant was a triumph. The transformed barn provided a cozy, magical setting for the performance. As the final notes of Silent Night faded away, the audience erupted into applause. Mayor Jenkins approached Holly and Finn, beaming. "You two have outdone yourselves. This might be the best Christmas pageant Thistledown has ever seen." Under normal circumstances, such praise would have filled Holly with joy. Instead, she felt a pang of sadness. How could she leave all this behind? As the crowd began to disperse, Finn turned to Holly. "We should talk," he said softly. Holly nodded, her stomach churning with anxiety. They made their way to a quiet corner of the barn. "So," Finn began, his voice strained. "A promotion. That's quite an opportunity." Holly nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "It is. But Finn, I don't know if—" "You should take it," Finn interrupted, his words coming out in a rush. "It's what you've been working towards, isn't it? You can't pass up a chance like this." Holly looked up, startled by the intensity in his voice. "But what about us?" Finn's expression softened. "Holly, I care about you, more than I thought possible. But I can't be the reason you give up your dreams. Thistledown will always be here." "Will you?" Holly asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Finn didn't answer immediately, and in that pause, Holly felt her heart breaking. "I think," Finn said slowly, "that we both need to focus on our careers right now. You have this amazing opportunity, and I have a town to run." Holly nodded, fighting back tears. "You're right. Of course you're right." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I should go," Holly said finally. "I have a lot to think about." As she walked away, leaving Finn standing alone in the twinkling lights of the barn, Holly felt a sense of despair washing over her. She had come to Thistledown to save a parade, but somewhere along the way, she had found something she didn't even know she was looking for. Now, faced with the biggest decision of her career, Holly found herself torn between the life she had always thought she wanted and the unexpected joy she had found in this small town. As she made her way home through the snow-covered streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what choice she made, she stood to lose something precious. Chapter 16. The morning after the pageant dawned cold and clear, a fresh layer of snow blanketing Thistledown. Holly sat at her childhood bedroom window, watching the early risers trudge through the snow-covered streets. Her phone lay silent beside her, the job offer from Sandra weighing heavily on her mind. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Holly?" her mother's voice called. "There's someone here to see you." Curious and a bit apprehensive, Holly made her way downstairs. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Grace waiting in the living room, a determined look on her face. "Grace? What are you doing here so early?" Her friend's eyes sparkled with a mix of concern and mischief. "Intervention time. Get your coat. We're going for a walk." Before Holly could protest, Grace had her bundled up and out the door. They walked in silence for a while, their boots crunching in the fresh snow. "So," Grace finally said, "want to tell me what's going on with you and Finn?" Holly sighed, her breath visible in the cold air. "It's complicated, Grace. I got a job offer back in the city. A big promotion." Grace nodded, unsurprised. "And let me guess, Finn told you to take it?" Holly looked at her friend, startled. "How did you know?" "Because that man is as stubborn as they come," Grace chuckled. "He probably thinks he's doing the noble thing, letting you go to follow your dreams." They had reached the town square, which was still decorated for the festival. Holly's eyes were drawn to the magnificent Christmas tree at its center, remembering how she and Finn had worked together to decorate it. But what if? Holly hesitated, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. What if he's right? What if this is the opportunity I've been waiting for? Grace stopped, turning to face Holly. "Honey, only you can answer that. But let me ask you this. When you picture your perfect future, where are you? And more importantly, who's standing beside you?" Holly closed her eyes, letting Grace's words sink in. In her mind's eye, she saw Thistledown, transformed by the seasons. She saw herself planning events, not just for Christmas, but for every occasion that brought the community together. And beside her, steady and supportive, was Finn. Opening her eyes, Holly felt a clarity she hadn't experienced in days. "I need to talk to Finn." Grace grinned, linking her arm through Holly's. "That's my girl. Now, let's go find that stubborn man of yours." They found Finn at the town hall, buried in paperwork. He looked up as they entered, surprise and something like hope flashing across his face when he saw Holly. "Can we talk?" Holly asked softly. Finn nodded, following her out of his office. Grace gave Holly an encouraging wink before leaving them alone. In the quiet hallway, Holly took a deep breath. "Finn, I've been doing a lot of thinking about the job offer." Finn's expression was carefully neutral. "And?" "And I realized something," Holly continued, her voice growing stronger. "My dream job isn't about the size of the events or the prestige of the clients. It's about creating moments that bring people together, that make them feel part of something special." She stepped closer to him, her heart racing. "I found that here, in Thistledown. With you?" Finn's eyes widened, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "Holly, I don't want you to give up an amazing opportunity because of me. I couldn't live with myself if—" Holly cut him off, placing a finger gently on his lips. "I'm not giving anything up, Finn. I'm choosing the life I want. A life here, in this town that I love, doing work that matters. And hopefully, she added, her voice softening, a life with you, if you want that too. For a moment, Finn was silent, and Holly felt her heart hammering in her chest. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that lit up his entire being. "Holly Grant," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I have never wanted anything more in my life." He pulled her close, and as their lips met in a kiss that was long overdue, Holly felt as if every Christmas wish she'd ever made had come true at once. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "So, what now?" he asked, a hint of his old practicality returning. Holly grinned, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Well, I was thinking, Thistledown could use a full-time event coordinator, don't you think? Someone to bring a little magic to the town all year round?" Finn laughed, the sound warm and full of joy. "I think that's an excellent idea, and I know just the person for the job." As they walked hand in hand out of the town hall and into the sunlit, snow-covered square, Holly felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The Christmas festival wasn't over yet, and there were still challenges to face. But with Finn by her side and the support of the entire town behind them, Holly knew that the best was yet to come. This Christmas had brought her more than she could have ever imagined. A renewed love for her hometown, a sense of purpose, and a partnership that promised to last long after the last ornament was packed away. As they stopped to admire the twinkling lights of the grand Christmas tree, Holly realized that she had found her own personal Christmas miracle right here in Thistledown. Chapter 17. The days following Holly's decision to stay in Thistledown were filled with a whirlwind of activity. The Christmas festival was in full swing, and the town was bustling with holiday cheer. Yet, despite the joyous atmosphere, Holly couldn't shake a nagging sense of uncertainty. She sat in Grace's bakery, absently stirring a cup of hot chocolate, her mind elsewhere. Grace, wiping down the counter, noticed her friend's distracted state. "All right, spill it," Grace said, sliding into the seat across from Holly. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Holly sighed, setting down her spoon. "I don't know, Grace. I made this big decision to stay, to be with Finn and make a life here, but now I'm wondering if I've made a terrible mistake." Grace's eyebrows shot up. "What? But I thought this was what you wanted." "It is! At least I think it is," Holly replied, frustration evident in her voice. "But what if I'm giving up too much? What if I'm not cut out for small-town life in the long run?" Before Grace could respond, the bakery door chimed. They both looked up to see Finn enter, snowflakes clinging to his coat. His face lit up when he saw Holly, but his smile faltered as he noticed her troubled expression. "Is everything okay?" he asked, approaching their table. Holly forced a smile. "Of course, just girl talk. What brings you here?" Finn didn't look entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue. "I was hoping to catch you, actually. The mayor wants to discuss your idea for a full-time event coordinator position. Are you free this afternoon?" Holly nodded, trying to muster some enthusiasm. "Sure, I'll be there." As Finn left, promising to see her later, Grace fixed Holly with a knowing look. "You haven't told him about your doubts, have you?" Holly shook her head, guilt washing over her. "I can't. He's so excited about our future here. I don't want to disappoint him." Grace reached across the table, squeezing Holly's hand. "Honey, you need to be honest with him, and with yourself. It's okay to have doubts, but you can't keep them bottled up." Holly knew her friend was right, but the thought of voicing her fears to Finn terrified her. What if he thought she was having second thoughts about their relationship? Later that afternoon, Holly found herself in the mayor's office with Finn, discussing the potential new position. Mayor Jenkins was enthusiastic about the idea, outlining the positive impact it could have on the town's economy. "With your experience and connections, Holly, you could really put Thistledown on the map," the mayor said, beaming. "We're talking year-round events, attracting tourists from all over the state." Holly nodded, trying to match the mayor's excitement. But as the meeting went on, she felt increasingly overwhelmed. The responsibility of single-handedly revitalizing the town's event scene suddenly seemed daunting. As they left the town hall, Finn was practically buzzing with energy. "This is incredible, Holly. Just think of all the possibilities. We could start planning a spring festival, maybe a summer concert series." He trailed off, noticing Holly's lack of response. "Hey, what's wrong? I thought you'd be more excited about this." Holly took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't keep her feelings hidden any longer. "Finn, I'm not sure I can do this." Finn's face fell. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I'm not cut out for this? What if I'm making a huge mistake by giving up my career in the city?" The words tumbled out of Holly in a rush. "What if we're moving too fast?" Finn stepped back, hurt evident in his eyes. "I thought this was what you wanted. You said you were choosing this life." "I know, and I meant it. I'm scared, Finn. What if I'm not enough for this town? For you?" A heavy silence fell between them. Finn's expression was unreadable as he processed Holly's words. "I see," he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Maybe you need some time to think things through. Figure out what you really want." Before Holly could respond, Finn turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the snow-covered square. She watched him go, a lump forming in her throat. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, that her doubts would push him away. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town, Holly found herself wandering aimlessly through the streets of Thistledown. The festive decorations that had seemed so magical just days ago now felt like a mockery of her confused emotions. She ended up at the old barn where they'd held the Christmas pageant. Slipping inside, she was enveloped by the quiet darkness. Memories of the joy and connection she'd felt here washed over her, bringing tears to her eyes. Holly sank onto a hay bale, burying her face in her hands. She'd come to Thistledown to save a parade, but somewhere along the way, she'd found a piece of herself she didn't know was missing. Now, she was terrified of losing it all, the town, Finn, and the sense of belonging she'd discovered. As night fell over Thistledown, Holly remained in the barn, grappling with her fears and trying to find the clarity she so desperately needed. The Christmas festival continued around her, but for Holly, the magic of the season felt suddenly out of reach. Chapter 18. The following morning, Holly woke to the sound of gentle knocking on her bedroom door. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of Finn and her uncertain future. "Holly?" her mother's voice called softly. "There's someone here to see you." Expecting to see Grace, or maybe even Finn, Holly was surprised to find Benjamin, Finn's colleague, waiting for her in the living room. "Benjamin? What are you doing here?" Holly asked, confusion evident in her voice. Benjamin offered a kind smile. "I hope you don't mind the early visit. I thought you might need someone to talk to who isn't quite as emotionally involved in the situation." Holly sighed, gesturing for Benjamin to sit. "Finn told you about our conversation, didn't he?" Benjamin nodded. "He did, but I'm not here on his behalf. I'm here as someone who's known Finn for a while and who's seen the change in him since you came to town." Holly felt a pang of guilt. "I never meant to hurt him. I got scared." "It's okay to be scared, Holly," Benjamin said gently. "Change is terrifying, especially when it involves your heart. But can I share something with you?" Holly nodded, curious. "Before you came back to Thistledown, Finn was... well, he was all about efficiency and progress. He saw the town as a project to be managed. But watching him work with you on this festival, I saw a different side of him. He started to see the heart of this town, the community spirit that makes it special. And that's because of you." Holly felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But what if I'm not enough? What if I can't live up to everyone's expectations?" Benjamin leaned forward, his expression serious. "Holly, do you know what makes a great event planner? It's not just about organizing details or managing budgets. It's about bringing people together, creating moments of joy and connection. And from what I've seen, you have that gift in spades." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The question isn't whether you're enough for this town or for Finn. The question is, Is this the place where you can be the best version of yourself? Holly sat back, considering Benjamin's words. She thought about the joy she'd felt planning the festival, the sense of accomplishment when the community came together. She thought about Finn and how their partnership had brought out the best in both of them. I think, Holly said slowly, I've been so focused on what I might be giving up that I forgot to see what I'd be gaining. Benjamin smiled. That's a start. Now what are you going to do about it? Holly stood up, a newfound determination in her eyes. I need to talk to Finn. Do you know where he is? Last I saw him, he was headed to the town square. Something about final preparations for the closing ceremony of the festival. Holly grabbed her coat, pausing at the door. Thank you, Benjamin, for everything. As she rushed out into the crisp morning air, Holly's mind was clear for the first time in days. She knew what she wanted, and she was ready to fight for it. She found Finn in the town square, directing a group of volunteers as they set up for the closing ceremony. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd had as restless a night as she had. Finn! Holly called out, slightly out of breath from her run. He turned, surprise, and a hint of wariness in his eyes. Holly, what are you doing here? I needed to see you, to talk to you, she said, her heart racing. I'm sorry about yesterday. I let my fears get the best of me. Finn's expression softened slightly. Holly, if you're having doubts? No, she interrupted, stepping closer to him. I mean, yes, I had doubts, but not about you, or us, or this town. I was doubting myself, my ability to be what everyone needs me to be. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. But I realize now that I was looking at it all wrong. This town, this job, you don't need me to be perfect. You just need me to be me. And being here, doing this work, being with you, that's when I feel most like myself. Finn's eyes searched her face, hope beginning to replace the hurt she'd seen there before. Are you sure? Because, Holly, I don't want you to stay out of obligation or fear of missing out. I want you to stay because this is where you want to be. Holly reached out, taking his hands in hers. Finn MacLeod, this is exactly where I want to be. Planning events that bring joy to this community, working alongside you to make Thistledown the best it can be. That's not settling or giving up on my dreams. It's choosing a dream I never knew I had until I came back here. A smile slowly spread across Finn's face, lighting up his eyes in a way that made Holly's heart skip a beat. Well then, Miss Grant, I believe we have a closing ceremony to plan. Ready to show this town what we can do together? Holly grinned, squeezing his hands. Absolutely. Let's make some magic. As they turned to face the bustling town square, now hand in hand, Holly felt a sense of peace wash over her. The doubts and fears that had plagued her melted away, replaced by excitement for the future she and Finn would build together in Thistledown. The Christmas festival's closing ceremony wasn't just the end of a holiday celebration anymore. For Holly and Finn, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, community, and the kind of Christmas spirit that lasted all year round. Chapter 19. The day of the Christmas festival's closing ceremony dawned bright and clear, the fresh snow glittering under the winter sun. Holly woke early, her heart light with the certainty of her decision and the anticipation of the day ahead. As she made her way to the town square, she couldn't help but smile at the transformation that had taken place over the past few weeks. Thistledown had always been charming, but now it positively glowed with holiday spirit. Garlands draped from lamppost to lamppost, twinkling lights adorned every shop window, and the grand Christmas tree stood proudly in the center of it all. Finn was already there when she arrived, clipboard in hand as he directed the final preparations. His face lit up when he saw her approaching. "Good morning," he said, his smile warm. "Ready for the big day?" Holly nodded, feeling a surge of affection for this man who had become such an integral part of her life. "More than ready. Let's give Thistledown a Christmas to remember." As the morning progressed, the square began to fill with townspeople and visitors alike. The air was thick with excitement and the scent of cinnamon and pine. Holly found herself caught up in a whirlwind of last-minute tasks, adjusting decorations, coordinating with performers, and ensuring everything was perfect for the grand finale. Amidst the chaos, she kept catching glimpses of Finn. He seemed to be everywhere at once, solving problems before they could arise, his calm efficiency a perfect complement to her creative energy. Every time their eyes met across the square, Holly felt a little jolt of electricity. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, Mayor Jenkins took the stage to begin the closing ceremony. Holly and Finn stood side by side at the back of the crowd, listening as the mayor praised the success of the festival and the spirit of the community. "And now," the mayor announced, her eyes twinkling, "I'd like to invite the two people who made all of this possible to come up and say a few words. Holly Grant and Wynn MacLeod, please join me on stage." Holly felt a moment of panic. They hadn't prepared any speeches. But as Finn took her hand and led her through the crowd, she felt her nervousness melt away. They had come so far together, they could handle this too. As they reached the stage, Finn gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping up to the microphone. "Thank you, Mayor Jenkins, and thank you to everyone who made this festival such a success. When I first came to Thistledown, I saw a town that needed modernizing, updating. But what I've learned, thanks in large part to Holly, is that the true strength of this town lies in its traditions, its sense of community, and its incredible people." He turned to Holly, his eyes shining with emotion. "Holly showed me the heart of Thistledown, and in doing so, she captured my heart as well." A collective awe rose from the crowd. Holly felt tears pricking at her eyes as Finn continued. This festival was about more than just celebrating Christmas. It was about coming together, overcoming challenges, and creating something beautiful. And I can't think of a better partner to have by my side, both in planning this festival and in life. Finn stepped back, gesturing for Holly to take the microphone. She took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of familiar faces. "When I came back to Thistledown, I thought it was just for a short visit. I had no idea that I would fall in love all over again, with this town, with its people, and," she turned to Finn, her voice softening, "with you." She faced the crowd again, her voice strong and clear. "This festival has shown me that magic isn't just something that happens in big cities or on grand stages. It's here, in the small moments of kindness, in the way a community comes together, in the love we share with one another. Thistledown isn't just my hometown, it's my home, and I'm so grateful to all of you for welcoming me back with open arms." As applause erupted from the crowd, Holly turned to Finn. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and kissed him, right there on stage in front of the entire town. For a moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and grinning, the square had erupted in cheers and whistles. Mayor Jenkins was beaming as she stepped back up to the microphone. "Well, folks, I think that says it all. Let's hear it one more time for Holly and Finn, and for the best Christmas festival Thistledown has ever seen." As they made their way off the stage, hand in hand, Holly felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. This was more than just the end of a successful event. It was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one filled with love, purpose, and the magic of Thistledown. The festival's closing ceremony continued around them, but Holly and Finn only had eyes for each other. They had found something special in each other, and in this town, something worth cherishing and nurturing for years to come. As the first notes of Silent Night filled the air and snow began to gently fall, Holly looked up at Finn, her eyes shining. "Merry Christmas, Finn," she whispered. He pulled her close, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Merry Christmas, Holly. Here's to many more." And as they stood there, surrounded by the warmth and love of their community, Holly knew that this was just the beginning of their own personal Christmas miracle, one that would last long after the decorations were packed away and the snow had melted. Chapter 20. The days following the closing ceremony of the Christmas festival were a whirlwind of activity for Holly and Finn. The success of the event had put Thistledown on the map, and inquiries were pouring in from neighboring towns and even national media outlets, all wanting to know the secret behind their magical celebration. On a quiet evening, A week after the festival had ended, Holly and Finn found themselves walking hand in hand through the town square. The decorations were still up, twinkling softly in the twilight, lending a romantic glow to the snow-covered scene. "I can't believe how much has changed in just a few weeks," Holly mused, leaning into Finn's side. Finn smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I know. Who would have thought that a stubborn town manager and an ambitious city planner would end up here?" They chuckled together, remembering their initial clashes and the journey that had brought them to this moment. As they approached the grand Christmas tree at the center of the square, Finn suddenly stopped, turning to face Holly. There was an intensity in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. "Holly," he began, his voice soft but firm, "these past weeks have been the most incredible of my life. You've shown me what it truly means to be part of a community, to create something magical that brings people together." Holly felt tears welling up in her eyes as Finn continued. "I came to Thistledown thinking I needed to change it, to make it more modern and efficient. But you showed me that the heart of this town, its traditions and its people, are what make it special. You helped me find a home here, and in doing so, you became my home." Finn took a deep breath, reaching into his pocket. Holly's eyes widened as he pulled out a small velvet box. "I know this might seem fast," he said, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice. "But when you know, you know. Holly Grant, will you marry me? Will you partner with me not just in bringing joy to this town, but in building a life together filled with love, laughter, and maybe a little Christmas magic all year round?" Holly's hands flew to her mouth, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. For a moment, she was too overwhelmed to speak. Then, with a radiant smile, she nodded vigorously. "Yes!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Finn's neck. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes!" Finn let out a joyous laugh, lifting Holly off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, he gently slipped the ring onto her finger. A delicate silver band with a snowflake-shaped diamond, perfectly capturing the magic of their winter romance. As they sealed their engagement with a kiss, the Christmas tree lights suddenly blazed brighter, as if the very town itself was celebrating their union. Holly and Finn broke apart, looking around in wonder. "Now that's what I call Christmas magic," Finn chuckled, pulling Holly close. Just then, they heard the sound of applause and cheering. Turning, they saw a crowd had gathered. Grace, Benjamin, Mayor Jenkins, and many other townspeople, all beaming with joy. "We couldn't resist," Grace called out, grinning. "We saw Finn looking nervous all day and figured something big was happening tonight." Holly and Finn laughed, embracing their friends and neighbors as congratulations poured in from all sides. The impromptu celebration lasted well into the night, with someone bringing out hot chocolate and cookies, and others starting an impromptu carol sing-along. As the evening wound down, Holly and Finn found themselves once again standing alone by the Christmas tree, marveling at the turn their lives had taken. "So, future Mrs. MacLeod," Finn said, his eyes twinkling. "Any ideas for our wedding?" Holly grinned mischievously. "Well, Mr. MacLeod, I was thinking, how about a Christmas wedding? Right here in the town square, with all of Thistledown invited?" Finn's face lit up with joy. "I think that sounds perfect. A new tradition for our little town, perhaps?" "I like the way you think," Holly replied, leaning in for another kiss. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms under the glow of the Christmas lights, Holly felt a sense of complete contentment wash over her. She had come to Thistledown to save a parade and had ended up saving herself, finding a home, a purpose, and a love beyond her wildest dreams. The Christmas festival might be over, but for Holly and Finn, the real magic was just beginning. Their love story, born in the heart of winter, promised to warm their lives and the lives of everyone in Thistledown for many Christmases to come. And as the snow began to fall softly around them, dusting their shoulders and catching in Holly's hair, they knew that they had found their own personal happily ever after, one filled with the enduring spirit of Christmas, the warmth of community, and the unshakable bond of true love. Chapter 21. As spring blossomed in Thistledown, the town buzzed with excitement over Holly and Finn's upcoming Christmas wedding. The couple had thrown themselves into planning not just their nuptials, but a series of events that would keep the town's newfound spirit of community alive throughout the year. On a warm Saturday morning, Holly stood in the town square, clipboard in hand, overseeing the setup for Thistledown's first-ever Spring Blossom Festival. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and volunteers bustled about, setting up booths for local artisans and food vendors. "Holly!" Finn's voice called out. She turned to see him jogging towards her, a broad smile on his face. The school choir is all set up for their performance, and the flower arranging contest is ready to go. Holly beamed at her fiancé, still marveling at how seamlessly they worked together. "Perfect! And how are the preparations for the community picnic coming along?" "Grace has outdone herself," Finn replied, wrapping an arm around Holly's waist. "She's got half the town baking pies as we speak." As they stood there, surveying the growing crowd, Mayor Jenkins approached, her eyes twinkling with pride. "Well, you two have certainly been busy," she said warmly. "First the Christmas miracle, and now this. Thistledown hasn't seen this much activity in years." Holly blushed slightly at the praise. "We couldn't have done it without everyone's support, Mayor. This town is special." "That it is," the mayor agreed. "And it's all the better for having you both here." She paused, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Now, when are you two going to let me in on the details of this Christmas wedding I keep hearing about?" Finn chuckled. "All in good time, Mayor. We've got a few surprises up our sleeves." As the mayor moved on to greet other townspeople, Holly leaned into Finn's embrace. "Can you believe how much has changed in just a few months?" she mused. Finn pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "Sometimes I think I must be dreaming. But then I look at you, and I know this is better than any dream I could have imagined." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Benjamin, looking slightly frazzled. Guys? We might have a small problem. The face painter called in sick, and there's already a line of disappointed kids forming." Holly and Finn exchanged a quick glance, a silent conversation passing between them. "I've got this," Holly said with a grin. "Finn, can you handle the opening ceremony?" Finn nodded, giving her hand a squeeze. "Go work your magic, love." As Holly hurried off to save the day, Finn couldn't help but marvel at her energy and creativity. In no time, she had recruited a local art teacher and several high school students, transforming the face painting booth into an interactive art station where kids could not only get their faces painted, but also learn to create their own spring-themed masterpieces. The day unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. The Spring Blossom Festival was a resounding success, bringing together longtime residents and newcomers alike. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the town square, Holly and Finn found a quiet moment amidst the celebration. "You know," Finn said softly, "when I first came to Thistledown, I thought my job was to change this town, to make it more efficient, more modern." Holly nodded, remembering their initial clashes. "And I thought I was just here to save a parade and prove myself." Finn smiled, taking her hands in his. "But it turns out, Thistledown changed us. It showed us what really matters: community, tradition, and love. And now we get to be a part of keeping that spirit alive," Holly added, her eyes shining with happiness. As they looked out over the festival, seeing the joy on the faces of their friends and neighbors, they felt a deep sense of contentment. They had found their purpose, not just in planning events, but in nurturing the heart and soul of Thistledown. The Spring Blossom Festival was winding down, but for Holly and Finn, it was just another beginning. They had a summer concert series to plan, an autumn harvest celebration to organize, and of course, their Christmas wedding to prepare for. But more than that, they had a lifetime of love and partnership ahead of them. A chance to build something beautiful together, not just for themselves, but for the entire community that had brought them together. As the last notes of music faded and the townspeople began to drift home, Holly and Finn remained in the square, hand in hand. The twinkling lights that had been strung up for the festival reminded them of that magical Christmas when their love story began. "Ready to go home?" Finn asked softly. Holly smiled up at him, her heart full. "I am home," she replied. "Right here, with you, in this wonderful town." And as they walked away, arms wrapped around each other, they knew that their happily ever after was just beginning. The magic of Christmas that had brought them together would continue to bless their lives and the lives of everyone in Thistledown for many years to come. Chapter 22. As summer faded into autumn, Thistledown continued to thrive under Holly and Finn's enthusiastic leadership. The town had become a beacon of community spirit, drawing visitors from all over the state who were eager to experience the magic that seemed to permeate every event. On a crisp October morning, Holly stood in their shared office at the town hall, pinning the final touches to a large planning board. The board was covered with ideas and schedules for upcoming events, culminating in their Christmas wedding. Finn entered the office, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in hand. "How's it coming along?" he asked, setting one mug down beside Holly. She stepped back, surveying her work with a satisfied smile. "I think we've got it all mapped out. The Autumn Harvest Festival next week, then the Thanksgiving community dinner, and finally—" "Our wedding," Finn finished, a soft smile playing on his lips. He wrapped an arm around Holly's waist, pulling her close. "I can't believe it's almost here." Holly leaned into him, feeling the familiar flutter in her heart. "I know. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that we were arguing about modernizing the Christmas festival." Finn chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And now look at us, planning a wedding that'll bring the whole town together." Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Grace poked her head in, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "Sorry to interrupt, lovebirds, but we've got a situation at the bakery. A good one." Intrigued, Holly and Finn followed Grace to her bakery. As they entered, they were hit with the delicious aroma of fresh-baked goods and— was that the smell of paint? "Ta-da!" Grace exclaimed, gesturing grandly to a newly expanded seating area. "I've finally finished the renovations, and it's all thanks to you two." Holly gasped, taking in the charming space. Rustic wooden tables were paired with comfortable chairs, and the walls were adorned with local artwork. A cozy fireplace occupied one corner, promising warmth in the coming winter months. "Grace, this is beautiful!" Holly exclaimed, hugging her friend. "But how is this thanks to us?" Grace beamed. "Ever since you two started organizing all these events, business has been booming. I've had more customers in the past few months than in the last 5 years combined. It was time to expand." Finn nodded approvingly. "This is exactly the kind of growth we hope to see. Small businesses thriving, the community coming together. You've done a wonderful job, Grace." As they chatted over coffee and Grace's famous apple turnovers, Holly felt a growing sense of pride. They had set out to bring more life to Thistledown, and it was working better than they could have ever imagined. Later that evening, as Holly and Finn took a leisurely stroll through the town, they marveled at the changes they saw. The streets were busier, shops were staying open later, and there was a palpable sense of energy in the air. "You know," Finn said thoughtfully, "when I first came here, I thought this town needed to change to survive. But what it really needed was someone to remind everyone of what made it special in the first place." Holly squeezed his hand. "And that someone turned out to be us." They paused in the town square, where preparations for the Autumn Harvest Festival were already underway. Pumpkins and hay bales decorated the area, and a large banner announcing the festival hung between 2 lampposts. "Do you ever miss the big city events?" Finn asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Holly considered for a moment, then shook her head. "Not at all. Those events were grand and exciting, sure. But this," she gestured around them, "this is meaningful. We're not just planning parties, we're building a community." Finn pulled her close, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "I love you, Holly Grant. And in 2 months, I get to call you my wife." Holly's eyes sparkled with joy. "And I get to call you my husband, but you know what? We're already partners in every way that matters." As they continued their walk home, hand in hand, they discussed plans for the upcoming festival and their wedding. But more than that, they talked about their future, the life they were building together in this small town that had captured their hearts. The sun set over Thistledown, casting a warm glow over the autumn leaves. Holly and Finn, silhouetted against the fading light, were the picture of contentment. They had found in each other not just a love story, but a shared purpose, a commitment to nurturing the spirit of community that made Thistledown special. As they reached their home, a cozy cottage on the outskirts of town, Finn paused on the porch. "You know," he said with a grin, "I think we might need to start planning the spring fling soon." Holly laughed, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you? But you're right. Thistledown's not going to celebrate itself." They entered their home, already bouncing ideas off each other for the next event. As the door closed behind them, the warm glow from their windows added to the twinkling lights of the town, a beacon of love and community spirit that would shine bright for years to come. Chapter 23. The air was crisp and cold on Christmas Eve as Holly stood before the full-length mirror in Grace's cozy upstairs room. She smoothed down the front of her wedding dress, a beautiful creation of ivory silk and lace that sparkled subtly, reminiscent of freshly fallen snow. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate silver snowflake pendant around her neck, a gift from Finn on their first Christmas together. "Oh, Holly," Grace breathed, stepping into the room. "You look absolutely breathtaking." Holly turned, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation. "Do you think Finn will like it?" Grace laughed, pulling her friend into a gentle hug. "Like it? Honey, he's going to be speechless." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Holly's mother peeked in, her eyes immediately welling up with tears. "Oh, my darling girl," she said, crossing the room to embrace her daughter. "You're a vision." As the three women fussed over last-minute details, Holly's thoughts drifted to Finn. She wondered if he was as nervous as she was, if his heart was racing with the same mix of excitement and anticipation. Meanwhile, across town at the bed and breakfast, Finn stood adjusting his bow tie, his fingers fumbling slightly with nerves. Benjamin watched from nearby, an amused smile on his face. "Never thought I'd see the day when the unflappable Finn MacLeod would be all thumbs," he teased gently. Finn shot him a wry grin. "I've faced down city councils and balanced impossible budgets, but somehow this feels bigger than all of that." Benjamin clapped him on the shoulder. "That's because it is, my friend. You're marrying the love of your life today. It doesn't get bigger than that." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered town, guests began to gather in the town square. The towering Christmas tree stood as a glittering sentinel, watching over the celebration, its lights twinkling merrily. Rows of chairs had been set up, with an aisle down the center covered in rose petals and pine needles. Twinkling fairy lights were strung overhead, creating a canopy of stars. Mayor Jenkins stood at the front, ready to officiate the ceremony. She beamed as Finn took his place, looking dashing in his tuxedo, a sprig of holly pinned to his lapel. The soft strains of White Christmas began to play, and the assembled crowd turned to watch as Holly made her entrance. She appeared at the end of the aisle, her arm linked with her father's, looking radiant in her winter-inspired gown. Finn felt his breath catch in his throat. Holly was a vision, more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. As their eyes met, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Holly's heart swelled as she saw Finn waiting for her. His eyes shone with love and awe, and she felt any lingering nerves melt away. This was right. This was meant to be. As Holly reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Finn's, and Mayor Jenkins began the ceremony. "Friends, family, and citizens of Thistledown," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed square. "We are gathered here today on this magical Christmas Eve to celebrate the union of Holly Grant and Finnley MacLeod. Their love story is one that has touched all of our hearts and brought new life to our beloved town." Holly and Finn exchanged heartfelt vows, promising to support each other, to nurture their love, and to always keep the spirit of Christmas alive in their hearts and in their community. As they exchanged rings, snowflakes began to fall gently from the sky, as if nature itself was blessing their union. "By the power vested in me by the state and the town of Thistledown, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Mayor Jenkins declared joyfully. "You may kiss the bride." Finn pulled Holly close, their lips meeting in a kiss filled with love and promise. The square erupted in cheers and applause, the sound of joy echoing through the night. As they turned to face their friends and family, now husband and wife, Holly and Finn felt a sense of completeness. They had found in each other not just a partner in love, but a partner in life, in work, and in their shared vision for Thistledown. The reception that followed was a true celebration of community. The entire town came together, sharing in the joy of the newlyweds. There was dancing under the stars, hot cocoa and Christmas cookies, and an abundance of laughter and love. As midnight approached, Holly and Finn snuck away for a quiet moment alone. They stood beneath the grand Christmas tree, snowflakes falling gently around them. "Mrs. MacLeod," Finn murmured, pulling Holly close. "How does it feel?" Holly's eyes sparkled with happiness. "Like a dream come true, Mr. MacLeod, like the best Christmas gift I could have ever asked for." As they shared another kiss, surrounded by the twinkling lights and the soft blanket of snow, Holly and Finn knew that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after. They had found in each other, and in Thistledown, a home for their hearts, a purpose for their lives, and a love story that would inspire for years to come. And as the clock struck midnight, ushering in Christmas Day, the magic of the season seemed to linger in the air, promising many more Christmases filled with love, joy, and the enduring spirit of community that Holly and Finn had helped to rekindle in their beloved town. Chapter 24. 1 year later, on a crisp Christmas Eve morning, Holly awoke to the sound of soft cooing coming from the baby monitor. She smiled, feeling Finn stir beside her. "I'll get her," Finn murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to Holly's forehead before slipping out of bed. Holly stretched languidly, her hand coming to rest on her slightly rounded belly. Their family was growing, with another little one on the way, due in the spring. As she listened to Finn's soothing voice over the monitor, talking softly to their 6-month-old daughter Noelle, Holly's heart swelled with love and contentment. She made her way downstairs to find Finn in the kitchen, Noelle babbling happily in her high chair as he prepared breakfast. The scent of cinnamon and coffee filled the air, and through the window, Holly could see fresh snow blanketing their front yard. "Good morning, my loves," Holly said, giving Noelle a kiss on the top of her head and Finn a quick peck on the lips. "Good morning," Finn replied, handing her a steaming mug of decaf. "Ready for the big day?" Holly nodded, excitement bubbling up inside her. Today marked not only their first wedding anniversary, but also the culmination of a year's worth of planning and hard work. The Thistledown Christmas Festival had grown into a week-long celebration, drawing visitors from all over the state. And today was the grand finale. As they got ready for the day, bundling Noelle up in her tiny snowsuit, Holly couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in just 1 year. Their love had only grown stronger, deepened by the joys and challenges of parenthood. And Thistledown had flourished beyond their wildest dreams. The town square was bustling with activity when they arrived. The town's Christmas tree soared skyward, its branches laden with festive decorations in the center, surrounded by festive booths and attractions. Children laughed as they rode the carousel. The aroma of roasted chestnuts and hot chocolate filled the air, and carolers serenaded the crowds with classic holiday tunes. "Holly! Finn!" Mayor Jenkins called out, waving them over. "Everything looks wonderful. You've outdone yourselves this year." "We couldn't have done it without the whole town pitching in," Holly replied, bouncing Noelle gently in her arms. As they made their rounds, greeting visitors and checking on various attractions, Holly and Finn worked in perfect sync. They had become a team in every sense of the word, their strengths complementing each other both in their personal life and in their shared mission to keep Thistledown thriving. In the afternoon, they took a moment to themselves, strolling hand in hand through the festival they had created. Noelle was with Grace, who had insisted on giving the couple some time alone on their anniversary. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Finn asked, squeezing Holly's hand. Holly leaned into him, a contented smile on her face. In some ways, it feels like just yesterday. In others, it's like we've always been together. They paused by the spot where they had exchanged their vows a year ago. The memory of that magical night was still vivid in both their minds. I have something for you, Finn said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, wrapped package. Holly unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautiful snow globe. Inside was a miniature version of the Thistledown Town Square, complete with the grand Christmas tree and tiny figures ice skating. Oh, Finn, Holly breathed, her eyes welling up with tears. It's perfect. Turn it over, Finn urged gently. On the base of the snow globe was an inscription. To Holly, my love, my partner, my home. Forever and always, Finn. Holly looked up at her husband, her heart overflowing with love. I love you so much, she whispered, pulling him in for a kiss. As they broke apart, the sound of the town clock chiming caught their attention. It was time for the lighting of the Christmas tree, the grand finale of the festival. Hand in hand, they made their way back to the center of the square. Grace was there, holding Noelle, who squealed with delight at the sight of her parents. Holly took their daughter in her arms as Finn stepped forward to address the crowd. Friends, visitors, members of our wonderful community, Finn began, his voice carrying across the hushed square. A year ago today, on this very spot, I married the love of my life. And in doing so, I didn't just gain a wife, but a partner in every sense of the word. Together, Holly and I have had the privilege of working with all of you to make Thistledown a place where the spirit of community and the magic of Christmas live all year round. He gestured to Holly and Noelle. As our family grows, so too does our commitment to this town and to all of you. So, as we light this tree, let it stand as a symbol of the warmth, love, and togetherness that make Thistledown so special. With that, Finn flipped the switch, and the grand Christmas tree blazed to life, its thousands of lights twinkling against the darkening sky. A collective gasp of awe rose from the crowd, followed by enthusiastic applause. As fireworks began to explode overhead, painting the snow-covered town in a rainbow of colors, Holly and Finn shared a look of pure joy and love. This was their life now, a perfect blend of family, community, and the enduring magic of Christmas. Later that night, as they tucked Noelle into her crib, Holly and Finn stood arm in arm, watching their daughter drift off to sleep. Happy anniversary, my love, Finn whispered, his hand resting gently on Holly's growing belly. Here's to many more Christmases, many more festivals, and a lifetime of love and happiness. Holly leaned into him, feeling truly blessed. Merry Christmas, Finn. I love you. As they closed Noelle's door softly behind them, the gentle strains of Silent Night could be heard from the town square, a lullaby for Thistledown. Holly and Finn's love story, born in the heart of winter, had blossomed into something beautiful, touching not just their lives, but the entire community. And as they settled in front of their fireplace, the snow globe sitting proudly on the mantel, they knew that the magic of that first Christmas together would continue to bless their lives, and the lives of everyone in Thistledown for many years to come.